That night, I invited everyone to dinner. It was only a 3-course meal, but every course was a piece of evidence. When the server set the cast-iron pot on the table, my daughter-in-law saw who was standing behind the kitchen door and went pale. I only said one thing. "Would you like your appetizer? Or the confession first?" My name is Eleanor Whitaker. Ellie to most folks. I am 62 years old, and for the first time in 40 years, I am not stamping books down at the North Lake Public Library. Retirement. It is supposed to be a quiet victory, a time for gardening and finally tackling that stack of biographies I have been saving. I have lived in this house in Willow Ridge, Ohio, for my entire married life. My husband, God rest his soul, passed 5 years ago, leaving me with this sturdy 2-story colonial and a lifetime of memories packed into its walls. The heart of this house, the real engine of it, is the kitchen. It is not one of these new, sterile white and grey affairs. It is warm, with honey oak cabinets my husband installed himself and a deep porcelain sink that has seen more vegetables than a farmer's market. This kitchen holds the legacy of my mother-in-law. Her recipes are tucked into a worn, leather-bound book on the shelf. The sharp, tangy secret to her apple cider chow chow, the one that won the county fair 3 years running, and the Rust Belt barbecue sauce, a smoky, complex recipe that could make shoe leather taste like brisket. This kitchen is where I raised my son, Daniel. He is a good man, 34 now, and a team lead over at Western Freight Systems. He works hard, maybe too hard, which is why, when he asked if his wife, Harper, could move in just for a few weeks while their new condo was being renovated, I said yes. Of course, I did. Harper is 31 and, as she puts it, a food influencer. She is always holding her phone up to her plate, talking to it in a bright, breathless voice. Her dream is to launch a meal prep business she calls Sun River Kitchens. I thought it was nice. A modern hobby. I thought we might even share the kitchen. Maybe I could show her how to get the chow chow to snap just right. I was wrong. The first week was fine. The second week, the changes began. It started with the spice cabinet. I went to grab the paprika and found a small, silver fingerprint lock on the knob. My fingerprint, naturally, did not work. "Oh, Ellie," Harper said, not looking up from her phone. "I just organized that. The humidity can really affect the volatile oils. It is better if I handle the inventory." Then came the new, smart refrigerator. A sleek, stainless steel monolith that replaced my reliable old Frigidaire. I went for the milk and was met with a glowing touchscreen demanding a 4-digit passcode. "It is for Sun River." "Ellie," she explained, tapping away. "I am tracking inventory for my business plan. If you need something, just ask me or Dan. Ask her. In my own kitchen." The final straw was the cookware. My mother-in-law's cast-iron pans, the ones I have seasoned for 30 years, were moved to the highest shelf, replaced by a gleaming copper set that Harper said was better for camera. When I reached for my favorite Dutch oven, Harper physically stepped in front of me. Her hand was gentle, but her voice was steel. "Please, Ellie, stay out of my kitchen. I am in the middle of recipe development. It is a contamination risk. My kitchen." She said my kitchen. I backed away. I did it for Daniel. I saw the stress etched around his eyes, the way he was caught between his wife's ambition and his mother's traditions. He would catch my eye and give me a weak smile. Just for a few more weeks. "Mum, It means a lot to her. So I kept the peace. I ate takeout in the living room. I used the microwave in the basement utility room to heat my tea. I became a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around the borders of the room that had defined my life. I felt the loss of it like a phantom limb. The smell of baking bread was gone, replaced by the scent of vacuum-sealed plastic and unfamiliar, sharp spices. The unease settled deep in my chest. It was not just about the pans, it was about the erasure. Then, last Tuesday, my neighbour, Lorraine Kay, stopped me while I was weeding the hydrangeas. Lorraine has lived across the street since 1978 and misses nothing. "Ellie, dear," she said, lowering her voice. "Are you catering? I see that mid-fork supply truck stopping by your driveway every morning. Awfully early, too. Must be 5:30. Mid-fork supply." That was not a grocery delivery service. That was a commercial, restaurant-grade wholesaler. That night, I stood in the hallway, looking into the brightly lit kitchen. Harper was talking to her phone, arranging little plastic containers in perfect rows. The stainless steel reflected a stranger's territory. I whispered it to the quiet house, to the memory of my husband. If the kitchen isn't mine anymore, what else will be taken? Lorraine's comment about the mid-fork supply truck was a burr under a saddle. It stayed with me, itching. Librarians are, by nature, researchers. We are trained to find the thread and pull it. So I started pulling. It began with the mail. I still get the physical mail, despite Harper's insistence on going paperless. Tucked inside a stack of catalogues last week was an invoice from a restaurant supply company I did not recognize. It was addressed to H. Cole, Sun River Kitchens. But the address was mine, my house. I opened it. Charges for bulk spices, industrial-sized containers of vinegar, and 50 pounds of brown sugar. This was not recipe development. This was production. Daniel kept a supplementary credit card for household expenses, and I helped him manage the statements. I logged into the account that night, my hands feeling cold and stiff. The screen glowed in the dark of my study. There it was, a recurring charge, mid-fork supply. The timestamp was 5:12 in the morning, 5:12 a.m. Daniel is at the freight yard by 6. He would not be buying wholesale food before dawn, but Harper would. She was using his card, his name, to fund her operation. My phone buzzed. It was an alert from the Willow Ridge neighborhood app. Lorraine. Again. Smell of barbecue smoke near Hemlock Drive again. Anyone else notice it before sunrise? A knot tightened in my stomach. The Rust Belt sauce. My mother-in-law's recipe had a distinct, smoky hickory smell that always hung in the air. I went to the front door and accessed the doorbell camera's history. I scrolled back through the pre-dawn hours. There, at 5:34 a.m., the day before, the grainy night vision footage showed Harper dressed in sweats, carrying insulated bags and foil-wrapped trays from my kitchen to the trunk of her car. She was loading meal kits. She was running a full-scale, underground business from my home. I felt a sudden, sharp chill. I went to the kitchen. The room was dark, the smart fridge humming its low, proprietary song. I walked to the shelf and pulled down the old leather-bound recipe book. I knew every page. My hands trembled as I opened it. The chow chow recipe was still there. I turned the page. The Rust Belt barbecue sauce. Gone. The page was neatly, but recently, torn out. I flipped further. Her signature pecan custard. Gone. The buttermilk biscuit recipe. Gone. 3 pages, ripped from the spine. My breath caught. I looked at the kitchen counter. Harper's sleek laptop was open, plugged into the wall. She always left it unlocked, trusting, perhaps, that I was too old or too intimidated to touch it. I sat down, the stool cold beneath me. Her email was open, a folder labeled Sun River Drafts. I clicked it. The top email was a draft, not yet sent, addressed to a legal team at Primora Foods Group. The subject line, Sun River Kitchens Franchise Agreement, Final Review. I read the attached document. It was a contract. A deal to franchise her meal prep kits, using a proprietary line of sauces. It described the unique, heritage-based flavor profile of her signature products. Her products. My gaze drifted to the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association newsletter still sitting on the counter. I picked it up, my eyes scanning the fine print on the back. Section 4, Article B. No resident shall conduct any business or commercial operation, including food preparation for sale, from a residential property. She was breaking the HOA rules, but how was she handling the legal side? She could not get a business license here, unless a cottage food license. Some states allowed small batch sales from home. I went to my study computer. I searched the county business registry. Nothing under Harper Cole, nothing under Sun River Kitchens. I paused, a dreadful cold settling into my bones. I typed in my own name, Eleanor M. Whitaker. There it was, a newly approved cottage food permit issued 3 weeks ago. The application listed my kitchen as the primary place of business. It listed me as the proprietor. And at the bottom, a scanned image of a signature. It was a clumsy, looping attempt at my handwriting, but it was not my signature. She had forged my name. It all clicked into place. A horrible, sharp mosaic. The locked cabinets. The stay out of my kitchen rule. This was not about protecting her process. It was about isolating me. It was a systematic takeover. She was locking me out of my own kitchen to steal my family's legacy, to build her Sun River empire on my mother-in-law's recipes and my good name, all while using my son's money and my home as her illegal factory. She was positioning herself as the sole owner of these heritage recipes, ready to sell them to Primora Foods. She was not just taking the kitchen. She was stealing my entire identity. The knowledge of the forgery sat like cold iron in my stomach. For a day, I did nothing. I just watched her. I watched her carry heavy boxes from the mid-fork truck, sweating in the morning humidity. I watched her wipe down my counters with bleach wipes, as if I were the contamination. The anger was a low, steady hum. I needed to know how far she would go. The next afternoon, I walked into the kitchen while she was lining up her little plastic meal prep containers. I went straight to the locked spice cabinet and placed my thumb on the scanner. It flashed red. Denied. Harper didn't look up from her phone. Ellie, I am busy. I need the cinnamon. Harper, I thought I might bake. She sighed, a sound of profound, weary impatience. I cannot have you messing up the inventory counts. I will get it for you later. I want it now. This is my spice cabinet. I pressed my thumb to the scanner again. Red. Denied. She moved so fast I barely registered it. She did not shove me, but she grabbed my wrist and physically pushed my hand away from the cabinet. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Stay out of my kitchen, she hissed, her voice low and sharp. I told you. I am running a business. You are interfering. I pulled my hand back, rubbing my wrist. I looked at her. Really looked at her. This was not an influencer. This was a thief, cornered and territorial. I went to find my son. He was in the den, watching a football game, the volume low. Daniel. She just put her hands on me. He muted the television, his face tight. Mum. What happened? I tried to open the spice cabinet. My cabinet? She grabbed my hand and pushed me away. She told me to stay out of her kitchen. Again. I paused, letting the silence hang. She is running a commercial operation out of this house. Daniel? She forged my name on a county permit. He flinched. A quick, guilty closing of the eyes. He knew. He had to know. Mum, it is not like that, he said, running a hand through his hair. It is just temporary. She is under so much stress. This Primora Foods deal. It is everything. We need this. She forged my signature. Daniel, that is a crime. She said you agreed, he mumbled, looking at the floor. She said you were... that I was what confused senile. Mum, please. His voice cracked, and for a second, he looked like the 12-year-old boy I'd comforted. Just, please. Can you just put up with it for a few more weeks, just until the condo is ready and the deal is signed? Please. For me, we are finally getting ahead. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, who was now asking me to be an accomplice to my own erasure. I felt a profound sense of disappointment, so deep and cold it extinguished the anger. I turned and walked out of the den. I was completely, utterly on my own. I went to my study and sat in my husband's old chair. The leather creaked. My husband, Mark, had been a quiet man, but a smart one. He had a saying about this house, about our life. You want to keep the house. Ellie. He'd told me after we'd finally paid off the mortgage. You keep the kitchen first. It's the hearth. Lose the hearth. You lose the home. She was trying to steal my hearth. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Mark had been meticulous about records. 10 years ago, he'd insisted on scanning all of our important documents. Just in case. I pulled out the slim, black external hard drive. I plugged it into my computer. There it was. A folder labeled Family. Inside, recipes. And inside that, high-resolution, full-color scans of every single page of his mother's recipe book, including the 3 missing pages. I clicked on another folder. Legal, my driver's license, my passport, my social security card, all bearing my clear, consistent, and very real signature. The next morning, that hard drive went into a safe deposit box at the bank. The final piece of the puzzle came from Lorraine Kay. She called, her voice buzzing with neighborhood gossip. Ellie, you won't believe it. Your daughter-in-law is a local celebrity. She did an Instagram pop-up sale yesterday. Sold 300 jars of that Rust Belt BBQ sauce. 300 sold out in an hour, she said. 300 units. My blood ran cold. In fact, Lorraine continued, she dropped a jar off at my house this morning, as a thank you for being so understanding about the early morning trucks. Wasn't that sweet? Lorraine, I said, my voice perfectly calm. I am so curious to see her work. Would you mind bringing that jar over? She was at my door in 5 minutes. The jar was beautiful, sleek, with a professionally printed label. Sun River Kitchens, original Rust Belt BBQ. I thanked her and closed the door. In the quiet of my living room, my new, constrained territory, I opened the jar. The smell was wrong. It had the smoke. Yes. But it was underpinned by a cheap, almost rancid chemical smell. I dipped a spoon in. It was disgusting. She had substituted the expensive, rendered bacon fat and smoked paprika for cheap soybean oil and liquid smoke. It left a greasy film on my tongue. But the taste was not the worst part. My mother-in-law had been fastidious about allergies. Our recipe was, by its nature, free of all common allergens. This was loaded with soy. I looked at the label again. Ingredients: vine-ripened tomatoes, brown sugar, heritage spices, natural smoke. No mention of soy. No allergen warning. No disclaimer that it was processed in a home kitchen, which was required by the very cottage food permit she had forged my name to get. She was not just committing fraud and theft. She was putting people at risk. What if someone with a severe soy allergy bought this? I took my phone. I placed the jar on my dining room table, the November light hitting it clearly. I took a photo of the front label. I took a close-up of the ingredient list. I took a photo of the receipt Lorraine had given me, which thankfully had the Sun River Kitchens Instagram handle on it. I time-stamped every single image. I saved them to a new, secure cloud folder, right alongside the scans of my real signature and the original recipes. I looked at the jar of greasy, dangerous sauce. I could have called the police. I could have called the county health department right then. I could have marched into the kitchen and confronted her, thrown the jar at her feet. But I thought of Daniel. I thought of his plea. For me, Mom, he was a fool, but he was my son. A public explosion would ruin him, too. It would shatter our family. And Harper was smart enough to twist the narrative, to paint me as the jealous, interfering mother-in-law. No. A public confrontation was messy. It was emotional. It was what she would expect. My husband's voice came back to me. Keep the hearth. I would not win by screaming. I would win by being smarter. I would win by being a better host. A librarian knows that the quietest rooms often hold the most power. The best way to expose a lie is not to shout it down, but to surround it with so much truth that it suffocates. I would not cause a scene. I would set one. I put the jar of barbecue sauce in the back of my pantry, a piece of evidence waiting for its debut. I sat down at my desk, not with anger, but with a cold, methodical clarity. I would not fight her for my kitchen. I would invite her into a trap, using the one thing she thought she owned. I would host a dinner. A librarian does not plan an attack. She curates an exhibition. Every piece must be sourced, catalogued, and displayed in the perfect light. My house was compromised territory. The battle, therefore, would be fought on neutral ground, but ground I had meticulously prepared. I chose the Beacon House. It is the oldest restaurant in Willow Ridge, a place of warm brick, soft lighting, and deep booths, smelling of old wood and rosemary. It is where you take people for quiet anniversaries and serious conversations. I spoke to Margaret, the owner, an old friend from the library board. Margaret, I need the library room for next Tuesday evening, I said, and I have a few specific requirements. The library room was perfect. It was their smallest private dining space, intimate, and panelled in dark, comforting wood. Its most important feature, however, was a discreet service door, usually hidden by a tapestry, that connected directly to the main kitchen. It's yours, Ellie, she said, celebrating something, a new family business, I replied, my voice smooth. I want everything to be perfect. Next, the invitations. This was not a dinner party, it was a deposition. Each guest was a juror or a witness. Daniel and Harper were the easiest. I presented it as a celebration of her. Harper, darling, I want to properly celebrate Sun River Kitchens. I'm inviting some influential people from the community to meet you. It's time they saw what you are capable of. She practically glowed. Pride is a powerful lure. I called Lorraine Kay. Lorraine, I am hosting a small dinner to discuss some neighborhood matters, and your perspective as a long-time resident would be invaluable. I called Mr. Devereaux, the stiff-necked president of our homeowners association. Mr. Devereaux, Eleanor Whitaker, I am gathering a few community leaders at the Beacon House. We are discussing the future of small-scale home enterprises in Willow Ridge, and as HON president, your guidance would be essential. I called Ms. Alvarez, the county health inspector, using my library credentials. Ms. Alvarez, I'm retired from North Lake Library. I am organizing a small community panel on the new cottage food laws and public safety. We would be honored if you would attend as our guest expert. Finally, I called the corporate office for Primora Foods Group, finding the executive's name from Harper's email draft. I am calling on behalf of Eleanor Whitaker, the founder of the Rust Belt Family Table Recipes, I said, using a name I had just invented. We are hosting an exclusive, private tasting to demonstrate the authenticity of our heritage line before finalizing any agreements. We request your presence. They confirmed 2 representatives. The trap was set. Now, for the bait. I approached Harper while she was in the kitchen, surrounded by her shipping boxes. Harper, since this dinner is truly for you, I insist you provide the main flavors, I said, smiling. I want you to cook your signature Sun River dishes. Make the family proud. Show them exactly what you are selling. You want me to cater it? She asked, her eyes narrowing slightly, calculating. Oh, goodness no. The Beacon House will handle the service, but I have designed the menu around you. I handed her a crisp menu I had printed on heavy cardstock. A celebration of Sun River Kitchens, appetizer, the Rust Belt, BBQ bite, a modern twist on a classic. 2, main course, a duet of apple, cider chow chow, honoring tradition and innovation. 3, dessert, signature, pecan custard, the sweet taste of success. She read it, oblivious to the structure. She was not reading a menu. She was reading a press release about herself. It's perfect, she breathed. I knew you would think so, I said. The appetizer would force her to bring her own illegally labeled product. The main course would be a direct comparison. And the dessert, well, she had never even seen the real recipe for the custard. My final preparations were quiet. I visited a community lawyer, a bright young woman named Sarah. I did not need her to file a suit. I needed her to verify facts. I gave her a copy of my passport and the forged cottage food permit. I need a certified comparison of these 2 signatures. Please. I also asked for a neatly printed, laminated copy of the HOA bylaws. Section 4, Article B, prohibiting commercial operations. My last stop was the Beacon House, this time through the kitchen's back door. I was carrying a heavy, cloth-wrapped bundle. I found the head chef, Tom, whom I had known since he was a boy stealing cookies at the library. Tom, this is my mother-in-law's cast-iron pot, I said. unwrapping the heavy, blackened Dutch oven. "This dinner is complicated. I need you to make the real apple cider chow chow from the recipe card I'm giving you. And when you serve the main course, I need it served to the table in this exact pot." He looked at the heavy iron, then at my face. He recognized the weight of history. "I'll guard it with my life." Ellie. The night of the dinner. I arrived an hour early. Margaret let me into the empty library room. The table was set for 8. It looked beautiful. I took a small, digital audio recorder from my purse. Ohio is a one-party consent state, but this was a private business. I had already secured Margaret's written permission to record the meeting in her establishment. I reached under the heavy mahogany table and affixed the small device to the central support, hidden beneath the thick linen tablecloth. I pressed the record button. I sat down, my back to the wall, facing the door. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil and old books. It was quiet. It was perfect. It turned out I was not the only one planning a busy afternoon. My opponent, it seemed, was launching a preemptive strike. The day of the dinner. My phone chimed with a notification. Harper, in her infinite hubris, had tagged me in an Instagram story. I opened it. It was a video of her, hair and makeup perfect, standing in my kitchen. She was bubbling with excitement. "Big night, everyone," she chirped at her phone. "We are finalizing the Primora Foods deal at a very exclusive tasting. It is time to take Sun River to the next level." She paused, then added with a tight, knowing smile. "It is so important to cut out any negative, old-fashioned influences from your brand. You have to protect your vision. See you on the other side." She was not just stealing from me. She was publicly positioning me as the negative influence she was cutting out. An hour later, Daniel came home, his face pale. He was holding his phone, looking at the screen in disbelief. "Mum," he said, his voice quiet. "I just got an email confirmation from the utility company, the gas and electric accounts. They have been transferred. They are no longer in your name." I did not have to ask. "Harper Cole Whitaker." He nodded, looking sick. She was not just taking the kitchen. She was taking the house, utility by utility, signature by forged signature. Then, the mail arrived. On top of the stack was a heavy, cream-colored envelope, embossed with the Sun River Kitchens logo. It looked official. Inside was a letter, written in aggressive, corporate legal speak. It was a friendly cease and desist letter. It demanded that I, Eleanor Whitaker, immediately stop any and all use of the proprietary formulas belonging to the Sun River brand, specifically citing the Rust Belt BBQ and apple cider chow chow. It was signed by Sun River Kitchen's legal department. She was threatening to sue me for using my own mother-in-law's recipes. My hand was steady. I placed the letter in my purse with the other evidence. The phone rang. It was Lorraine. "Ellie, dear, I do not want to be a bother, but I thought you should know. It is not just the supply truck anymore. There is a large refrigerated truck parked at your curb right now. It is a weekday, broad daylight. Mr. Devereaux is already outside taking pictures. This is a serious violation." She was escalating her production, growing bolder, more reckless, as if on cue. My other line beeped. It was Ms. Alvarez, the health inspector, confirming her attendance for the evening. "Ms. Alvarez, how lovely to hear from you," I said, my voice warm. "Likewise, Mrs. Whitaker." she replied, her tone professional. I'm looking forward to our discussion. In fact, it is quite timely. I received an anonymous complaint this morning. Oh, I said, feigning surprise. Yes, a tip that a Mrs. Ellie at your address was selling barbecue sauce and pickles illegally from her home. It is always a shame when neighbours try to get each other in trouble. But of course, I am sure it is just a misunderstanding we can clear up tonight. Harper was trying to frame me. She was setting me up to take the fall for her crimes, painting me as the confused old woman running an illegal side hustle. The final blow came at 4 p.m. An email, not to me, but forwarded by me, from the Primora Foods representative. He had received my founder's tasting invitation. In response, he had sent me Eleanor M. Whitaker, a one-sided non-disclosure agreement. It was 20 pages long. It stated that as a condition of the tasting, I must agree to relinquish all claims of ownership or origin for any and all recipes presented, acknowledging them as the sole intellectual property of Sun River Kitchens. It was a complete and total surrender. They expected me to sign it before dinner. I looked at the email. I looked at the letter from Sun River Legal. I thought of the utility bill. I thought of her smirking face on Instagram. I closed the laptop. Sign it, I murmured to the empty room. We will see about that tonight. I picked up my purse. The Beacon House kitchen was already prepping. The service door to the library room, I knew, was already propped slightly ajar. The guests arrived one by one, filling the small room with polite murmurs. Harper was the last to arrive, sweeping in with Daniel in her wake. She was carrying an insulated Sun River Kitchens bag, beaming as she handed it to the waiter. Our appetizer, she announced to the room. The signature Rust Belt BBQ bites. I'm so thrilled for you all to try them. The two representatives from Primora Foods, a man and a woman in sharp suits, smiled thinly. Mr. Devereaux, the HOA president, nodded curtly. Lorraine Kay looked thrilled to be included, and Ms. Alvarez, the health inspector, watched with a pleasant, professional interest. Daniel just looked tired. We settled at the table. The waiter, perfectly cued, brought in the appetizers on a silver tray. They were small meatballs, glazed in that familiar, greasy sauce, each skewered with a toothpick bearing a tiny Sun River flag. Alongside them, the waiter placed a few of Harper's beautifully printed retail jars for display. We all took one. Ms. Alvarez did not eat. She picked up one of the jars. This is a lovely label, Ms. Cole, she said, her voice mild. I'm always interested in new local products. Can you tell me about the ingredients Harper preened? It's a heritage recipe, she said. All natural. Vine-ripened tomatoes, brown sugar, and of course, our secret heritage spice blend. I see, Ms. Alvarez said, turning the jar in her hand. And where do you produce these? The packaging requirements are quite specific. Oh, it's all perfectly legal, Harper said with a dismissive little laugh. I have a cottage food permit. I make it right at my mother-in-law's home. She has been so supportive. She gestured to me. All eyes turned. A cottage food license. You say, Ms. Alvarez continued, her tone still light. That's wonderful. Those permits are excellent for small batch producers. Of course. They stipulate that you must sell directly to the consumer and that your gross sales cannot exceed a certain threshold. And, naturally, that all ingredients are stored and prepared in the home kitchen. Exactly, Harper agreed, smiling broadly, not sensing the trap. That's so interesting, I said, setting my napkin in my lap. I reached into the large leather purse at my feet. I must have misunderstood the scale of your operation, Harper. Because when I see a commercial-grade refrigerated truck parked outside my house, like the one I photographed this afternoon, I slid a glossy 8x10 photo across the table to Mr. Devereaux. His eyes widened. And when I see invoices from Mid-Fork Supply for restaurant-sized orders, like these, I placed a copy of the credit card statement on the table, my finger pointing to the charge. This one was at 5:12 in the morning. That's a lot of cottage food. A dead silence fell over the table. The clinking of silverware stopped. Mr. Devereaux, a man who lived for rules, picked up the photograph. He then looked at the laminated card I had placed by his water glass. "Ms. Cole," he said, his voice booming in the small room. "As you know, Section 4, Article B of the Willow Ridge HOA Charter expressly forbids any resident from conducting a commercial operation. This," he tapped the photo of the truck, "is not a cottage industry. This is a shipping and receiving violation. The charter allows the board to levy fines of $500 per occurrence." He looked at Lorraine. "And Mrs. K has been dutifully reporting these occurrences for 3 weeks." Harper's smile froze. The colour drained from her face. That's," she stammered. "That's just for storage. I only cook small batches for family and friends." Before I could say a word, the man from Primora Foods spoke. He had not touched his appetizer. "I'm afraid that's not accurate, Ms. Cole," he said, his voice flat and cold. "Our negotiations are, and have always been, for a business-to-business acquisition. We are discussing a regional distribution deal in the 6-figure range, contingent on your ability to scale production. That's hardly cooking for friends." Harper looked like she had been struck. She turned, desperate, to Daniel. Daniel, my son, just stared at the table. He picked up his water glass, his hand visibly shaking. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, full of panic and a dawning, sickening realization. He had known, but he had never understood the depth of the fraud. Harper opened her mouth, then closed it. The room was utterly quiet, save for the low hum of the restaurant outside the door. I folded my hands on the table. The uneaten meatball sat on my plate, congealing. "The appetizer is finished," I said into the silence. "Shall we move on to the main course?" The waiter cleared the appetizer plates in a heavy silence. Harper was a statue of pale fury, her eyes fixed on Mr. Devereaux, who was now quietly reading the laminated HOA bylaws. As the waiter exited, the hidden tapestry-covered door to the main kitchen swung open. It was not a server who entered, but Chef Tom himself. He was wearing his tall white hat and carrying, with both hands, my mother-in-law's heavy black cast-iron pot. He placed it reverently in the center of the table on a thick wooden trivet. When he lifted the lid, a cloud of fragrant steam billowed out, filling the room not with the cheap, acrid smell of Harper's barbecue sauce, but with the sharp, sweet, complex aroma of apples, mustard seed, and turmeric, the real apple cider chow chow. "This," I said, my voice softer now, "is the heart of the matter." I reached into my purse again. I did not pull out a legal document. I pulled out a faded, black and white photograph of a smiling woman with a 1970s haircut, standing in my kitchen, holding that exact pot. This was my mother-in-law, Margaret Whittaker, I said. And this was her recipe. She perfected it in 1971. I placed another item on the table, a crystal clear, laminated scan of a yellowed, handwritten recipe card. Apple cider chow chow, it read at the top, in Margaret's looping cursive. This is a scan I have kept on a hard drive for over a decade, I said. I then produced the worn, leather-bound recipe book, the one from my kitchen shelf. I opened it to the page I had found, the jagged, torn edge where the recipe should have been. I slid the laminated scan up against the book's spine, the shadow of the torn paper on the scan, the slight water stain in the top corner. It was a perfect, forensic match to the remaining fibers in the book. You tore it out, I said, looking directly at Harper. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact. Harper found her voice, sharp and defensive. I did not. And so what if I was inspired by it? That recipe was old. It was dated. I improved it. I innovated. That's what a chef does. Innovated? I asked. I nodded to the waiter, who was standing by. He quickly served each guest a small portion from the cast-iron pot. Then, he brought out a second, identical set of small white bowls, filled with a substance that looked similar but smelled wrong. This, I said, gesturing to the pot, is the original. It has a very specific sugar-to-vinegar ratio, and it uses rendered pork fat for flavour. And this, I gestured to the small white bowl, is Harper's improvement, the one she is selling under the Sun River label. I looked at Ms. Alvarez. I was curious about the innovation, so I had a friend in the food science department at the State University run a simple analysis on a jar I acquired. Harper's eyes widened in panic. She replaced the pork fat with cheap, hydrogenated soybean oil. Not only does it spoil the taste, Ms. Alvarez, but I believe you will find no mention of soy on her all-natural label. Ms. Alvarez put down her fork. Her professional, pleasant demeanor vanished. She picked up the jar of BBQ sauce from the appetizer course and scrutinized the label again, then looked at the bowl of chow chow. Soybean oil, she said, her voice sharp. That is a top 9 allergen, Mrs. Whittaker. Failure to declare a major allergen is not a small claims issue. That is a Class 1 violation. That is a mandatory recall. People can die from this. She began writing, rapidly and grimly, on a small notepad. Mislabeling, adulteration, and a non-disclosed major allergen. This is a severe breach of the public trust. The Primora Foods executives looked at each other. The woman discreetly pushed her tasting bowl of Harper's chow chow toward the center of the table, untouched. The man cleared his throat. Our company's compliance standards are absolute, he said stiffly. We cannot be associated with this kind of liability. Harper's face crumpled. She looked wildly at Daniel. Dan, tell them it was a mistake. A labeling error. Daniel was not looking at her. He was staring at the cast-iron pot. The steam was still rising. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I simply leaned toward my son, my voice just loud enough for the table to hear. Daniel, I whispered. Do you remember that smell Sunday afternoons when you were a boy, and you would steal the pickled onions from the jar before Grandma Margaret could even seal it? He closed his eyes. A single muscle in his jaw twitched. He did not, could not, say a word. He was trapped between the warm memory of his grandmother's kitchen and the cold, criminal reality of his wife's ambition. His silence was the most damning confession of all. The waiter cleared the main course plates. The room was so quiet, I could hear the ice shifting in Mr. Devereux's water glass. Ms. Alvarez was shutting her notepad with a series of sharp, decisive clicks. "For our final course," I announced into the hush. "The dessert?" The waiter brought in 8 small, fluted ramekins. It was the pecan custard. The aroma that filled the room was not the one Harper knew. It was not the sharp, thin sting of imitation flavoring. This was the deep, almost smoky perfume of real Madagascar vanilla beans, a secret my mother-in-law taught me, the specific flavor lock that made the custard unique. It was the 3rd recipe Harper had torn from the book, and the one she truly had no hope of replicating. As the guests picked up their dessert spoons, I placed my final exhibit on the mahogany table. It was not a recipe. It was not a photograph. It was the official filing from the North Lake County Clerk's office, the one I had printed from the registry. I slid it directly in front of Ms. Alvarez. "This is the cottage food permit Harper mentioned earlier," I said, my voice steady. "The one that started her business." Ms. Alvarez put on her reading glasses. "Proprietor Eleanor M. Whitaker. Address 72 Hemlock Drive." "That is my name, and that is my address," I said. "I have lived there for 42 years, but I have never seen this document before in my life. And this," I pointed to the looping, uncertain scrawl on the signature line, "is not my signature." Harper shot to her feet, knocking her chair back. You told me I could—" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You gave me verbal permission? You said you wanted to help the family? You told me to handle all the paperwork." "Verbal permission to commit felony forgery?" I asked. I reached into my purse one last time and produced the laminated sheet from the community lawyer. "This is a certified signature comparison, prepared by a forensic handwriting expert. My legal signature, from my driver's license and passport, is on the left. The signature from the county permit is on the right." I placed it on the table. The differences were not subtle. They were glaring. One was the firm, confident hand of a 62-year-old woman. The other was a clumsy, childish imitation. Ms. Alvarez looked at the comparison, then back at the permit. "This," she said, her voice cold with professional anger, "changes things. This is not just a health code violation. This is identity theft. This is a criminal matter." Harper looked wildly from Ms. Alvarez to Daniel, then to the Primora executives, who were watching her with a terrifying, blank neutrality. Before she could form another word, the woman from Primora Foods raised a perfectly manicured hand. "Ms. Cole," she said, her voice cutting through Harper's panic. "Your mother-in-law's evidence is, frankly, just confirmation of our own internal findings." Harper froze. "What? What are you talking about?" "Primora Foods takes intellectual property and brand origin very seriously," the man in the suit added. "When you came to us claiming exclusive family heritage rights to these recipes, we initiated a standard due diligence check. We found discrepancies. The timeline of Sun River Kitchens did not seem to match the established history of the recipes you were attempting to license." The woman continued. "We decided, therefore, to bring an independent consultant to this tasting, someone with deep knowledge of Ohio regional culinary history, to verify your claims of authenticity." As if summoned by her words, the hidden service door to the kitchen swung open, It was not Chef Tom. It was a woman in a crisp, white chef's coat I did not recognize. She was in her late 40s, her face stern, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She walked calmly into the room. Harper, who had been pale, turned a waxy, bloodless white. She looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She sank back into her chair, her hands gripping the table. She whispered one word. Nora. The chef stopped and looked at Harper. "Hello, Harper," said Chef Nora Hale. "It's been a long time." The Primora executive smiled, a cold, corporate gesture. "Ms. Cole, this is Chef Nora Hale, the executive chef at the Columbus Inn. We asked her to join us tonight. She mentioned she knew you. In fact, she said she was your mentor at the Culinary Institute, right before you were expelled from the program." Nora Hale stepped forward, her eyes locked on Harper. "You were expelled," Nora stated, her voice resonating in the small, silent room. "For photographing my personal recipe ledger after I refused to partner with you." Harper stared at her, speechless. The woman she had stolen from first was now here to witness her second, identical crime. Nora looked at the small ramekin of untouched custard in front of Harper. She picked up the spoon and gestured to it. She never could get the flavor right, Nora said, not to Harper, but to me. She always used the cheap extract. Nora Hale's eyes were cold and steady, fixed on the woman who had been her protégée. "She wasn't just inspired by my recipes, gentlemen," Nora said, addressing the Primora team, but never looking away from Harper. "She was my apprentice in the evening class. She photographed my personal ledger during a busy dinner service after I refused to sell her my dessert concepts. She was expelled for flagrant intellectual property theft 2 days later. What you have in those jars is not heritage. It's a pattern." The judgment was swift. The room transformed from a dinner party into an arraignment. Ms. Alvarez snapped her notepad shut. The sound was as loud as a gavel in the silence. "Mrs. Whitaker, Chef Hale, thank you. Your testimony is noted. As of this moment, I am filing a formal report with the county." She turned her severe gaze on Harper, who seemed to be shrinking in her chair. "We have multiple, severe violations. The undeclared Class 1 allergen, illegal production in an uncertified residential facility, and, most seriously, the fraudulent procurement of a state permit using a forged signature. I will be recommending the maximum possible fines and a permanent ban on you ever holding a food handler's license in the state of Ohio." Before Harper could even process that, Mr. Devereaux cleared his throat, tapping his laminated HOA card. "And I, Ms. Cole, will be filing this violation notice with the board tomorrow morning, the fines for the unauthorized commercial shipping, as photographed, and the illegal operation, as confirmed by Ms. Alvarez, are substantial, per Mrs. K's logs. That is 21 separate days of violations. The fines will be significant. And be advised, any reoffense, any attempt to operate any business from that address, will trigger a formal motion to ban all non-residential activity permanently." The two Primora Foods executives had heard enough. The man stood up, followed immediately by his colleague. He reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out the thick, 20-page non-disclosure agreement they had emailed me just hours before, and tore it neatly in half. He placed the 2 pieces on the table next to his untouched custard. "Our offer is withdrawn, Ms. Cole. Effective Immediately, he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. Primora Foods will not be associated with fraudulent origins, public health risks, or criminal activity. Good evening, Mrs. Whitaker. They walked out of the room. They did not look back. The door clicked shut, leaving just family and the witnesses. The silence was heavy, suffocating, broken only by a single, ragged sob that tore itself from my son's chest. Daniel slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. "Mom," he whispered, his voice broken. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I knew. I knew she was using the recipes. I knew about the trucks." He looked up, his eyes wrecked with a shame so deep it hurt me to see it. We were under so much pressure. The condo payments, the new loans. She said this was our one chance to finally get out, to build something real. She convinced me you were lonely, that this gave you a purpose. She said deep down you wanted her to take over, that you just didn't know how to let go. I let her handle it all. I didn't want to see it. I'm so sorry. Mom. I looked at my son, my heart aching for the fool he had been, but my face remained steady. My gaze shifted to Harper. She was trapped, vibrating with a silent, impotent rage. She was cornered. This was the moment for shouting, for recriminations, for tears. I would offer none of them. I kept my voice low, but it carried in the dead quiet room. I am not going to humiliate you, Harper. I am not interested in a spectacle. I am interested in boundaries, and I am interested in consequences. So, you have two choices. You will make one of them tonight. I held up one finger. Choice 1. You will write a full, public apology on your Sun River Instagram account, stating that you are ceasing all operations, effective immediately, due to origin and labeling discrepancies. You will turn over the original, physical pages you tore from my mother-in-law's book. You will sign a legal document, which my lawyer will provide, permanently relinquishing any and all claim to those recipes. And you will reimburse me and Daniel for every single cent you charge to our cards, the wholesale food, the packaging, the truck rentals. You will pay it all back. I held up a second finger. Choice 2. I take this file in my purse, which contains the certified forgery analysis, the evidence of your illegal operation, the HOA violations, Chef Hale's sworn testimony, and Ms. Alvarez's entire report, and I walk out of this restaurant. Tomorrow morning, I will hand-deliver copies to the North Lake County Prosecutor, the Ohio Department of Health, Mr. Devereaux's HOA Board, and the town police. I will pursue this to the absolute fullest extent of the law. Ms. Alvarez, Mr. Devereaux, and Lorraine Kay watched, silent. This was no longer their domain. This was a family reckoning. Harper stared at me. Her mind was visibly racing, calculating the angles, searching for an escape route. A third option. There was not one. She sat rigid, her jaw clenched so tight her temples pulsed. The silence stretched. She said nothing. I leaned forward slightly. There's one more course. Harper, I whispered. The last one. Just then, the waiter re-entered. He moved with practiced silence, not carrying food, but a small silver tray. On it rested 8 heavy, cream-coloured envelopes. He placed one in front of each of us, myself. Daniel, Harper, Ms. Alvarez, Mr. Devereaux, Lorraine, and even Chef Nora. I picked up my envelope. This, I said to the table. is the final course. It is an invitation. I looked at my guests, my new, strange jury, to my home next Sunday, for what my husband always called the Sunday table. The kitchen is for family again. As they looked at the invitations, I slid one last document across the mahogany to Harper. It was a simple, one-page agreement typed by Sarah, my community lawyer. It clearly outlined Choice 1. It stated that she would cease all operations, post a public retraction, return the 3 stolen recipe pages, and agree to a full repayment plan for the money taken from Daniel's credit card. In exchange, this document stated, I would not pursue criminal charges. I would provide Ms. Alvarez with this agreement, showing compliance. Her future ability to hold a license would be contingent only on her full restitution and her successful completion of the county's Advanced Food Safety and Ethics course. Harper's eyes scanned the page, searching for a loophole. She looked up at me, perhaps one last time, to see if there was any room to salvage her brand. Before you decide, I said softly, there is one last thing you should see. I placed a final, thin piece of paper on the table. It was not laminated. It was a simple printout of a government filing receipt. I took the liberty, 48 hours ago, of registering a federal trademark for my family's legacy. Harper's gaze dropped to the paper. She read the approved filing name, Rust Belt Family Table. It was over. I had not just reclaimed my kitchen. I had legally protected its history. She had nothing left to steal. She had no brand, no recipes, no permit. Sun River Kitchens was, in fact, nothing but an empty name. That final, quiet click of the last piece falling into place seemed to break the tension. Daniel let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. He sat up, and for the first time that night, he looked clear. I will pay the credit card debt. Mum? All of it, he said, his voice firm. It was my card, and my negligence that let this happen. I will cover the full amount. He then turned to his wife. His voice was not angry. It was just terribly sad. Harper, we are not moving into the condo. I am renting a small apartment in town. For myself. Starting tomorrow. We are going to marriage counseling. If we are going to fix this, it will be with clear, honest boundaries. Ms. Alvarez nodded, accepting this. She looked at Harper. The offer to allow you to retake the safety course stands, Ms. Cole. This is not a life sentence, but it is a lesson in consequences. If you comply, if you pass, you may, one day, start a legal business, the right way. Mr. Devereaux stood, folding his napkin. Mrs. Whitaker, as long as the commercial traffic and unauthorized storage cease immediately, and the associated fines are paid, the HOA will consider the matter resolved. Chef Nora, who had watched this all with a quiet intensity, turned to me. Ellie, she said, and her voice was surprisingly gentle. These recipes, they are too good to be locked in a vault or in a book. The church downtown is starting a community outreach program, teaching heritage cooking skills. Perhaps you and I could teach a class together. Keep these flavors in the community, where they belong. I looked at her, and at this table of strangers who had helped me reclaim my home. I smiled. I would like that very much. Nora. All eyes returned to Harper. She was hollowed out. The fight was gone. The ambition drained. She picked up the pen I had left on the table. Her hand was shaking. She signed her name at the bottom of the agreement. She pushed the paper back to me, and then she finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine, her face crumpled, and a single, hot tear fell onto the table. It was followed by another. "Ellie," she whispered, her voice choking. I am so sorry." It was not the apology of a thief who had been caught. It was the desperate, broken sound of a person who had finally, and painfully, been forced to see the real and devastating consequences of her actions. I inclined my head, accepting it. I looked at the signed paper, at the invitation, at my son. "This dinner," I said, my voice calm and clear, "was never about winning or losing. It was about remembering that a kitchen is where we keep people. It is not a place to take from them." Chef Tom, as if on cue, appeared and quietly closed the service door to the kitchen. The warm, rich smell of the pecan custard still hung in the air. I looked at the heavy, black, cast-iron pot in the center of the table, my mother-in-law's pot. The knot of theft and betrayal, of being erased in my own home, was finally, peacefully, untied. Not with shouting, but with wisdom, with the law, and, in the end, with a little bit of mercy. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so curious to know where you are all listening from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on the matter. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and if you can, support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.